The following is a special video presentation of the Hennepin County Library.
Hi, I'm Pat Lindquist. Welcome to a discussion with Chef Extraordinaire Paul Prudhomme. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Either Chef Extraordinaire or dirty old cook, one or the other.
Oh, not a dirty old cook. Listen, we are so fortunate. Today we're going to talk with a chef who's done everything everywhere, and today the new Fork in the Road, your latest book. Pretty exciting.
It really is. That's number 4, and it's very exciting to be here with you, and to be in this part of the world, in the Twin Cities, is good. Spending time with the people. The book is about, it's a really new direction for me. It's, you know, I've had people tell me over and over again how they would like to eat good food and not have a whole lot of butter and fat in it. And so I did that. I did a book that the food really tastes good, and the fat is non-existent, any added fats, just what's in the meat or what's in the natural product. The fat that's in there exists, but that's it. And it was fun to do, and it really worked. It tastes good.
And we're going to learn something about that today. But for those of you who haven't heard of Paul Prudhomme, which are very rare, I'm sure, I thought it'd be fun to talk a little bit about your history before we get into the book today.
Sure.
Because Paul's a New Orleans boy who's traveled the country and cooked around, and over 40 years you've been cooking.
That's right. 46 years this year I've been cooking.
Must have started very young.
Yeah, I think I was before my mother, before I was born, probably.
You were getting ready?
No, I'm 53 years old, and when I was 7, I started helping Mother. We lived on a farm. We had, you know, we had no electricity and we had no gas, and so we had a wood-burning stove, and we had to store all our food for the winter. So we did canning and made sausages and did all this stuff, and I was involved. I was, you know, from 7 on, I would stir the pots. We had a wood box, and Mother would stand me in a wood box, and I'd stir the pots, and when I get in trouble, I'll holler, "Mom, you know, come help," you know.
It's boiling over.
Yes. And so I got, the most important thing I think happened to me was to watch the family's dinner time. Mm-hmm. And when the food was really genuinely, when I thought it was great tasting, it just, you look around, the volume went up and everybody was excited and they was smiling, and it just made a difference when the food tasted better. And somewhere between that and 15 years old, I just decided that that was a wonderful thing to do to another and for another human being, was to give them something great to eat. And I've been working at it ever since. I mean, my mission in life is making people happy by improving their dinner.
Oh, well, and we're so lucky that we're being improved. Now, you went on the road and did cooking around the country 5 or 6 or 8 years before you came back home, right?
Yeah, I started when I was 17, right I got out of high school. It was actually a month before my 17th birthday, and I opened a restaurant in my hometown. It was a drive-in restaurant, 1950s drive-in restaurant, and this was in 1957. And it wasn't very successful because I'd only been in a restaurant, physically been in a restaurant 3 or 4 times in my life. And so I knew nothing about the business. I just knew I wanted to cook. And that went out, it went broke, and then I had 3 or 4 more of them go broke. And then I started traveling around the country, and that part of it was just like an adventure, because I was single, and if I got to a road, I'd say, well, let's see, I'm going to go that way, because I knew I could get a job anywhere, as I was a cook and I'm from Louisiana. You know, as soon as you would tell somebody that you're a cook and you've worked in New Orleans and you're from Louisiana, they'll give you a job, you know, because they know you're good.
I love it. I love it. Now, by the 70s, you came back to New Orleans and started your first restaurant, right?
Yeah, what happened in the 70s was I would come home. I was working in the mountains in Colorado, and I would come home for a month at a time, and in between the summer and winter season, and I would watch the family cooking differently, and especially young people. I remember I arrived home, and I was there for a couple of hours, and one of my nieces said, "Come move your car so I can go to the store," and I said, "Sure." And I decided, well, I'll just take her. So I took her to the store, and she bought frozen things that I would never, ever imagine the family doing.
You hadn't grown up with that.
That's right. It was a local company making a mix for rice that we call dirty rice or rice dressing. And she bought it, and I said, "Why are you buying that?" And she said, "Well, it's easier, you know." Oh. And then we talked about it a while, and I talked to some other family members, and I realized that we were changing, and we were changing for the worse. I mean, we're losing our culture. Everywhere as I traveled, I'd cook for people, and they'd get real excited about the food. I mean, they loved the idea of having wonderful tasting food. And when I'd come home, they had lived that way all their life, so they were sort of getting out of it. And I returned in 1972 specifically to cook Louisiana food and try to get the Louisiana people to return to cooking their food. And I never dreamed that all this stuff would happen after, you know. I mean,
Well, now, when you say Louisiana food, what is a Louisiana food? There's a
Well,
Creole and there's a Cajun, we've heard, right?
you know, Louisiana is such a special place. It's a very small place, but it's the middle of this huge landmass that we call the United States of America. And it's right on the Gulf. It has water, you know, the Gulf of Mexico. And it's very warm there, and it's very mysterious. I mean, there's lots of swamps, and there's forest, and there's just, I mean, you know, there's voodoo there, and there's so many cultures that are mixed together. I mean, you know, the emotional cultures, the Spanish and the Italians, you know, and the French and the Latins. I mean, it's just very...
I heard there's even a little Irish guy in
Oh,
there,
every
too.
once in a while we got an Irishman in there. But it was so, I mean, when these people got together, it was so emotional. You know, it was, they just loved to have fun, and they loved to eat. And so we created two kinds of cooking, one called Cajun and one called Creole. And a simple identification is Cajun was country food.
Okay.
And the Creole was city food.
City food.
And the city food
Okay.
was got herbs and spices and things brought into it from Europe, because the Europeans that owned New Orleans and parts of Louisiana, and they'd leave people behind when they left. And so they continued that culture, and they would import things from Spain or from France or wherever they were from, Italy. And so we got grocery stores in New Orleans still that just specialize in Italian food or in Spanish food or in French food. And so these neighborhoods formed, and you know, it was much more sophisticated culture, and they used a lot more herbs than we did. In the country, we had only we had sassafras, which we call filet, and we had bay leaves, and we had a little bit of oregano and thyme, and that was about it for herbs. We had lots of spices. We had many kinds of peppers.
Well, and wasn't it true, you said that many times the butter and eggs that you had in the country you sold because of the poor families to the city where they use butter in sauces, but you didn't always do that.
We never cooked with butter. We'd use pork lard and chicken fat and those kind of things. We'd never cook eggs. I mean, I didn't know you ate eggs for breakfast until I was 25 years old, you know?
Really?
I mean, after I got to New Orleans and realized after a couple of years that most people had eggs for breakfast. I didn't know that. But our lifestyle, our living was really family oriented. And we had a big family. I'm the 13th child. And
13, lucky 13?
that's it. Not only that, I was born on the 13th.
Oh, no.
And I got 13 letters to my name.
Oh.
So it's really a magical number for me.
It is
really
magical.
Is, yes. But Louisiana has all these things. They have a 12-month growing season.
Okay.
And they have three kinds of water for fish and seafood. There's sweet water and brackish water, which is salty and sweet mixed. We have wonderful lakes that produce incredible seafood. Then we have the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, we can have carrots and turnips and root vegetables in the ground in January and harvest them. And so, and then we've got all these emotional cultures who like to eat good food. And so that created two kinds of cooking, two kinds of music, and two distinct cultures now that are married together. I mean, if you left today and went to Louisiana and tried to look for Cajun food or for Creole food,
They're
you'd have to go
mixed now, huh?
Yeah, in all the restaurants they are. I mean, even in my restaurant it is. You'd have to go to somebody's house. If you went to my brother's houses, who's lived in Opelousas all his life, and his, all his family, his wife's family, and so their lifestyle is still pretty much the same. I mean, they pretty much eat what they always did, and so you could find Cajun food there. If you go in a neighborhood in New Orleans where there's, where the neighbors have been, where the people have been there for generation, you could find Creole food. But in the restaurants, it's mixed together, which is fine because together they really dynamic. I mean, they complement each other, and together they just sort of make you happy to eat them.
Well, the thing that we all remember is as those years were coming on in the 70s, your spices became famous, and your technique of blackening things was what I remember first hearing about.
Right.
Was that the turning point when nationally we started learning about blackened catfish and blackened things?
On a national level, yes. On a local level, I'd been doing television and giving away recipes and stuff in New Orleans for a number of years. But when I opened Cape Paul's, I had a technique worked out for blackening. And I remember the first night we opened, that I was there, we opened in, my wife Kay and I opened in July of '79. And I couldn't go to work because we wasn't making enough money. So I had to keep my regular job. And I was a corporate chef for a New Orleans food family, the Brennan family. And so a few months later, we was able to, for me to come to work with her. And I remember the first night we served blackening, the waitresses knew about it, they had tasted it, they loved it. They say, how do we explain this? How do we tell people about it?
That it isn't burned, right?
Yeah, well, because we had human beings never seen that before.
Sure.
So we had about 35 people waiting outside to come in the restaurant. We opened, they came in, I cooked 3 pieces of redfish and cut it up to give everybody a taste, and over 20 people ordered blackened redfish. And within a couple of weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, especially at lunch, the businessmen would come in and it'd just, automatic, 4 redfish, 4 blackened redfish. And we were raising ducks and guineas and chickens, and we were raising rabbits and all kind of wonderful things, and it wasn't selling. So I just put a limit on how many redfish they could have. I mean, I just,
when it's gone, it's gone, huh?
One to a table. No, that was it. Just one to a table.
And this is what the sauce or the seasoning looks like then.
Yes.
That you created. That would go on the outside of the fish.
Yes, and you know, one of the things that people not accustomed to using seasoning, especially seasoning that has a lot of energy to it, and this seasoning does have a lot of energy, and you just need a little bit. You know, you need to. What seasonings or herbs and spices should do is let the natural taste through and then support it, boost it, and change it. I mean, when you take a bite of really wonderful food, each bite is just a little bit different. So it keeps it very exciting to eat. You know, it's like an adventure.
Well, as we're talking and going on forward, maybe I should let you heat up the pan and tell me how you put seasoning on a piece of meat like that chicken we see right there, and how the cookbook started developing. This is your fourth one.
Fourth one.
So the recipes were in such demand, they said, hey, let's get this in print, or what happened?
Well, actually, I probably wanted to do a book for 6-7 years before I did the first one, because I wanted to write down Louisiana food.
Okay.
Every time I'd pick up a recipe, it would become more and more sort of the idea of what we did became vaguer and vaguer. Like, you know, they started putting mushroom soup in some of the dishes, and yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean,
There went that originality.
So I said, this is an emergency. You know, we got to put this down so people will know about it. But one of the things that about cooking is that there's so many ways to obtain lots of taste, and one of the best ways is actually, to me, there's two main ways. One is to put the taste in the bottom of the pan and then use it to make a sauce. You know, bring liquids into it and make a sauce with it. The other way is to attach taste right to the product that you're cooking, and that's what we're going to show you how to do now, which is unusual. People had not done that a whole lot before, and we have poultry magic, which we're sprinkling on the top of the chicken breast, and these chicken breasts are skinless, and all the fat's been trimmed away, and they've been pounded, so they're nice and even. They're not real thick in one end, and that's important to do. Now the skillet's hot.
And look, not too much spice, just a little.
Yeah, just a little bit. You know,
Yeah.
just sprinkle some on, and the thickness of it, see, it's pretty much the same thickness. And the skillet's hot. It's empty. There's nothing in it, and it's a non-stick skillet. But if you use the regular skillet, it wouldn't stick either, because at 350 degrees, you put things in a skillet, and it just don't stick. And the reason
We think it's going to burn.
that's
See?
true.
Yeah.
But the reasoning is so simple, because if the reason things stick is that they have little ups and downs in the skillet. And so if you put a piece of raw meat, I mean, it's very, very, very mushy-like and very, very fluid. And so you put it in a pan, and what happens is it goes over a little barb, you know, and then it starts cooking. And when it starts cooking, it gets hard. And so it's stuck there. It can't move. And there's many of those things in a pan. But when you start with a hot pan, what happens is that the heat keeps the meat from laying real flat. The pressure from the heat, because, you know, that's the way we shoot a rocket to the moon, is by adding heat to it. You know, I mean,
I never thought of that.
Yeah, that's
You're almost a scientist when you do this stuff, huh?
And so what we do is we want to make sure that we preserve as much of the juice as possible. When you know you're losing juice or from a product is when you see lots of steam. Now you can see smoke, which won't be juice, but the steam will tell you it's juice. Now,
Have you turned your heat down just a little bit? How hot would you say that is if someone
well,
was...
this is bronzing. It's one step
Bronzing.
below blackening. And the
Okay.
difference between everything is the same, except blackening is at a higher temperature and uses cast iron. And if I did it, it would fill the studio with smoke, so we didn't want to do that. But
This is your new word, bronzing? I like that word.
Yeah, this is the
Bronzing.
way of cooking that you can do at home, and it won't fill the kitchen with smoke, and it gives wonderful flavors to the meat. And what it does, it pushes the juices up. As the heat is applied, the surface is dried off. And as the surface dries off, the rest of the juices inside are pushed up. It's like when you put a hamburger on a grill, and if you leave it too long, you see blood coming out the top.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
that's because the heat has pushed the juice all the way through, and now it's starting to run out, and you're going to have a very dry hamburger. And so the thing to do is to turn it over and let the juice get pushed back the other way and center it. See, I've turned this over, and you've seen very little steam come out, and yet there's a nice brown color on it. And so it's going to be I mean, you can tell by looking at it that this is going to taste good. I mean, look, that color is just right there, and you know that things that have a nice brown color to it really taste good.
And we've
so,
seen no fat in the skillet yet.
no fat in the skillet.
It's one of
And
your
we're not-
healthy treatments.
Right, we're not going to have to put it in, and we just take it and turn it over a couple of times to make sure that the juices stayed centered. and we have a perfect way of cooking, because all those colors on the surface and the herbs and spices are going to give it changeability. Because in evaporating the surface moisture, what happens is that you dry the fibers that make up the taste and makes up the color. And when you dry them, you change them colors. They get brown. Each color brown is a different taste. It's like roasting a peanut. I mean, it's still a peanut, but now it's not nuttier, and you know, it has a lot more taste. And the same thing is like with frying chicken. You know, I mean, when you fry chicken, you get it that nice nutty brown color, and it tastes much, much different, because, and we like those tastes together. We like the nuttiness with the chicken meat. And so that's what's happening here. The inside is all the juice left, because I'm not losing much of it, because I keep turning it. And so when I start eating, I take a bite of this, and on the outside it'll have like all the things that normally attach to a skillet, like you see here, is being attached to the meat. And so I have all the taste I need on the outside. Then when I bite on it, I break it up, and then all those little particles come into the juice of the meat. And when that happens, it just makes it taste absolutely wonderful. I'll give you an idea. I'll give you an idea of what happens inside of your mouth, and you can see this is really.
Now, you've only spent about 3 or 4 minutes on each side.
Oh, that's all it takes. It's cooked very quickly.
So here, the working crowd, this is a wonderful way to cook when you get home from work. And
you could get home in the evening, and you could take the chicken out, because it's good to take it out, not let it get too not too cold. You know, you don't want to take it right out the refrigerator and cook it. But if you take the chicken out and you take a pan and put it on the stove on a real low fire, and then you go change your clothes, when you come back, you can start cooking, and in minutes you can have dinner on the table. Because if you got a little stock handy, you could throw some.
Now, what is that exactly you just poured in?
Well, I poured in. You could pour in water. You could pour in any kind of liquid, and it would work. But what I have here is a chicken stock, and so I put the chicken stock in, and then I'm scraping the bottom of the pan and getting all the brown spots up. Now, you see how this turned color? I mean, look at the difference in between the color of these two things. I mean, it's much, much darker brown than this. And those are the particles that are on the outside of the chicken. So when you start chewing, that's what happens. You know, and it's a perfect stock, because inside the chicken is the juices of the chicken, and it gives you this wonderful color and, of course, incredible flavor.
Oh, it looks
so
lovely.
That's what bronzing and blackening is about. You know, it's about cooking food with an enormous amount of taste, real simply.
When you did blackening to begin with, did you ever have the smoke go off and the smoke alarms and fires?
I never did it at home. I always, you know, after I did it the first time, you know, I realized that this is not a home dish.
Yeah.
And I tried to put it on my recipes. I guess I didn't put it in strong enough words. But after I started, I did the first book and I started traveling around, I was getting phone calls from people telling me that the fire department visited, and the smoke alarms, and, you know, things about the boss. You know, they bring the boss home and Mama cooks this stuff for him, and then they got to take him to a restaurant. So we started putting real dark letters on that and say, warning, warning, you know.
Well, I do notice that the book starts out with notes from the test kitchen. So you go through a test kitchen process and really experiment a lot with these, don't you?
Yeah, especially this book. Every one of my books, I personally cook the recipe till I think it's good. And then we have somebody with me writing it down. And then I give it to an editor in New Orleans that cooks it again, and then corrects, you know, any things any mistakes that I might have made, or corrects the spelling of the words. And then when I taste theirs, and it's as good as the one I did, then we know we have a complete recipe. But with this book, it was really tough, because this is a no-fat, no added fat book, and it really took a lot of time, a lot of techniques. It probably took me 5-6 years before I figured out how to make it taste good.
Oh, I can't believe it.
If you take the fat out of things, you're going to miss it. I mean, there's no substitute for butter. You know, I mean, butter is butter is butter. You
I wonder why we like that fat taste so much in our tongue.
It's real simple, because 30, 40 years ago, we needed it. You know, we used to heat our bodies with our bodies. We used to cool our bodies with our bodies. We walked everywhere. We worked hard. We lifted, all kind of things. And this burned up all this energy. And now, you know, we're in automobiles. We got beautiful clothes and air conditioning.
Push button TVs.
Yeah, and so, you know, we don't burn the energy anymore.
Right.
And now we're taking in probably 30 or 40 times the amount of fat that we did then, and so our body usage went down, the fats went up, and then it causes problems. The body can't handle it all. And you know what's so amazing is that the things that we like is energy things. We like sugar, the taste of sugar, the taste of salt, and the taste of fats. And those are the three things that we needed 40, 50 years ago, because there wasn't much around them, you know. I mean, it was the thing that was necessary, and we needed so much of it. And so now that we don't need much of it, we're eating more than ever. And so I mean, every fast food place basically puts sugar and fats and salt into anything to make it good. We like it, and so we're just consuming too much of it.
Well, now you've then reduced the sauce a little. All the flavors have been absorbed, and you serve that as your gravy for your meat, and it's still fat-free dish.
Absolutely, and or you could have taken the and put vegetables in it and steamed them into this juice, and it would really be wonderful. I'm going to just give you a little bit of the juice taste on the end of the fork there. And while you're tasting, I'm going to tell them about the stock, because it's really important to defat the stock. And what that means is that when you cook chicken bones, or when you cook fish bones, or when you cook anything to make a rich juice, there's fat comes along with it. And because there's fat in it, you need to get it out. And so what you do is you take a strainer and you put ice cubes in it, or you put, even better, you put crushed ice in it. And then you get the stock real cold, like 36, 38 degrees. And you put it in a pitcher and you sort of pour it around in a circle over the ice. And if you have a long cone-shaped strainer, it's even better. And as this goes down through the ice, it gets colder and colder. And so when the fat gets to like 33, 34 degrees, it stops in the ice because it's gelled.
Okay.
And the juice keeps going down through. Yeah.
It's
and so you
straining the fat out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful idea.
And you can see there's no fat in there. I mean, you can see no lumps, and it's real cold. And this then you take it and reduce it down, and it just makes things taste so wonderful. Yeah?
Well, in fact, the beginning of the book has so many techniques. I think those people who think, oh, I can't cook like Paul Prudhomme, this is the book I would like, because each page here telling how to roast the pepper, how to defat the stock, which you just told us, all of those set you up to go through. And then you go on through, and again, underneath, protein, fat, calories. Someone has broken down everything for us to make a decision.
And some of the recipes in the book are very high in calories, but very low in fat. This is one of the recipes that I get lots of comments on, and actually I've had 4 or 5 people tell me here in Twin Cities that they've cooked this the last couple of days.
What are we showing to the camera here?
This is a corn and shrimp bisque, and it's just really wonderful. It comes out, it comes out real rich and thick, and you just think I'm decadent eating a bunch of fat, it's like, oh, this is good, And there's no fat in it. It's just spectacular.
That's good to know. You also get into desserts, which I think you've even got some tricks on desserts that are not so fattening, which are probably pretty exciting.
We have a cheesecake that's actually been the favorite thing since we hit the road, and it's a no-bake cheesecake, and it's just absolutely super. We have a wonderful bread pudding.
Here's something looks funny.
Yeah, this is a bread pudding, and this is one of the only things in the book. There's 2 things in the book that's over 30% of its calories from fat, and this is one of them. We call it yum stuff because it's just so good, and it's lower in fat than ordinary chocolate things. But it was so good I couldn't leave it out the book. I think it's like 38 or 39% of the calories are derived from fat in it. But I said, we got to have some exceptions somewhere, and so I put it in the book anyway. And
now, what are the rules? You have to have how much fat out of it to be happy for the Heart Association? You've met those standards, I think.
Yes, the Heart Association has a pyramid, and the thing you should eat the least of, is meats and fats and so on, which is the big part of the pyramid, and it's on the bottom, and it's the thing they want you to have the least. And they say that out of anything you eat, the calories that derive from fat should be 30% or less. And actually in the book we've kept them way under that. Some of them are 2%, 3%, and some is non-existent. But the cheesecake, for instance,
this looks
per
good.
slice,
2 grams of fat in cheesecake.
Yes.
And some of the tricks are
good.
A non-fat sour cream, which we can buy nowadays.
Right.
And we can buy fat-free yogurts nowadays.
Right.
There's some wonderful fat-free products.
There's some surprises in here too, because there's low-fat mayonnaise, and cottage cheese and yogurt, and we take grape juice, white grape juice, and reduce it down until it's a syrup.
Does that give us a sweetness?
A sweetness and a wonderful extra flavor. And we put vanilla in it. And then we do another thing that's unusual, which I've never done in any of my books before. I don't use packaged things. I never have. Everything's from scratch. But to make this work and make it work good and keep the fat low, I got a package of instant pudding, out of the store, and by itself,
sugar-free instant pudding.
Yeah, and by itself it don't taste very good, but you add all these things to it, and then it gets real good.
So again, you have really updated the concept that those of us who do use some convenience foods, if we shop wisely, get the non-fat ones. There are some things that are using that, but you're also looking at every ingredient. You're even finding snack foods. Now, how did you find snack foods that are fat-free? What do we have here? That was also a tough category because. Snack foods are really important,
At least it is to people like me that's overweight and love to eat.
Watching TV, you got to
Yeah.
have something in your
Potato
hand.
chips,
Yeah.
popcorn, yeah.
Can't smoke anymore. You might as well eat, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to tell us we can't kiss and hug soon.
Oh,
you know?
I hope not. I hope not.
Well, what I did is I took a variety of dry beans and peas, and I cooked them till they were nice and tender. But before they break up, we'd stop cooking them, and then it was cooked in a rich broth with a lot of seasonings, and it would dehydrate. And when it dehydrated, it would get real crispy. But it kept all the flavors. It took the water out when you dehydrated it, but it kept all the flavors inside that you had cooked it in. And so you have this wonderful crunchy.
Can we taste these?
Oh, just listen to the crunch, you know. The other thing we did was took varieties of rice. Because you know, 68,000 varieties of rice. Did you know that?
No.
68,000.
We've got wild rice here in Minnesota.
That's
I know
true,
that.
and you got good wild rice. And this is basmati rice, and I think it's one of the best tasting rices. This is very popular in India. And this is brown rice, which we've been seeing a lot since the 1960s. And you do the same thing with them. You cook them in a rich stock with lots of herbs and spices and a few vegetables. And once they cook and they're nice and tender, you shut off the fire, you drain off whatever juices that's left on them, and then you put them in a skillet and you roast them. And you roast them until they get real brown and real crunchy, and they have this nuttiness outside and this rice taste, and it's just spectacular.
Kids would love this too,
Oh,
wouldn't
yeah.
they?
And see, like this one I put...
You can leave a trail wherever you go, though, Paul.
This one, that's right. I got to follow my way back here. This one I put a little bit of the grape juice in it, so it has a little sweetness to it, and I cooked it right in the grape juice.
Isn't that
And
something?
so it has a wonderful rice nuttiness and has the crunch and has a little bit of sweetness to it. So it's possible for us to eat and eat low fat, but we have to learn how to cook again.
Yeah, it is a learning
Yes,
process. It's
yes.
taking some time. Well, we're so lucky to see this book today. And I'm going to just wrap up with, at the end here, if there was anything else I wanted to check that people should look for in this kind of a book. Is there anything else you want to tell them about it?
Well, one of the things that's very important in the technique is that you got to start with a hot pan. And if you start with a hot pan, instead of draining the juice out of your vegetables or your meat or whatever you're cooking, it actually pushes the juices up. But it achieves a brown color that oil does when you cook things in oil. And that brown color is very sweet. And so it makes it taste good.
So we used to think oil was the only thing that got brown, but the spice line will help us do that too in the cooking technique.
And the cooking technique, which when you start with a hot pan, one of the things that oils do is transfer heat very quickly. And so you start with a hot pan and the heat's already there, so you don't need the oil to transfer the heat. And the richness, you can make with using other things like dry beans, where you puree them, and we make bean powders and bean flours. And so there's all kind of new things out there so we can eat healthy, or at least the way we're being told now is healthy.
And not only are we healthy, we're Paul Prudhomme, fork in the road, a different direction for cooking. And you know, it's a wonderful direction to take. Thank you for your time today.
It's my pleasure.
Good to have you.
A presentation of the Hennepin County Library.